Hello, thank you for tuning into my channel. I had to find some shade at this Thomasville Rose Garden in Thomasville, Georgia. Today's Throwback Thursday video, we're taking those rows and we're sewing those together using Quilt-As-You-Go. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. Enjoy your Throwback Thursday. Bye! This is the quilt that I've been working on for quite some time. It is a Christmas gift and I'm almost done with it. I'm really excited about it. What I've done is I've taken 3 different types of blocks and put them together. These are all denim on top, and then there are different type of fabric below. The strip that we're going to be joining together is right here in the middle. You can see that there's a gap here, and so this is the area that we're going to join. To make this quilt, I basically use 3 types of blocks. One is I use an applique block where I appliqued elephants onto the denim and stitched around it in a lot of different patterns. The other one is a Quilt-As-You-Go, but this is actually strip piece, but you can see the quilting lines on this side. I'll flip it over in a minute and then we'll see the back. And then the other type is free motion quilted. I've quilted straight line designs. So let's see what that looks like on the back. With this one you won't really hopefully see anything, but you'll definitely see a pattern on this one and on this one. So here we go. On the back there's a variety of different fabrics that have been used. This is the elephant block. I don't know how well you can see that right now. This is the string piece or the strip piecing that I did. You can see the quilting lines on the other side. And then this third one is the free motion quilting block. So I have put all these together. I'll explain a little bit about how I decided where the rows would be at the end of the video. The first thing that I'm going to do, each one of these strips is a little bit longer from when I pieced it. So the first thing I'm going to do is just take a ruler and cut these so that they're flush to the edge. And then I'll show you how to make the sashing. So when we talk about the sashing that I use for this quilt, I use this cream or beige for the front of the quilt. And then for the back, I used a brown, and it's here. You can see it here. I chose to do a 1/2 inch seam allowance instead of a 1/4 inch seam allowance because of the denim. It kind of shreds, not shreds, but it kind of frays easily. So you can see even like right there, it's starting to fray. So you want to make sure that you have enough seam allowance so that it doesn't come out of the stitching. So what I decided to do was for the front border, I used a 3 inch or sashing. I used a 3 inch sashing. And then for the back, I used a 2 inch sashing. The 3 inch sashing is actually going to be folded and pressed in half before I put it on, okay? But you can see it's joined here by a 45-degree angle and then clipped a 1/4 inch and pressed. So I want to show you how to do that on the machine. My binding is also going to be 3 inches, and so I'm going to show you how I did that with the machine. All I've done is put my fabrics at a right angle to each other, right sides together at a right angle, and I'm focusing on the starting point and the ending point. So even as I stitch, I'm going to stitch from this intersection at the beginning to that same intersection at the end. And so I just start stitching and I kind of keep my eye focused on that bottom seam or that bottom intersection, and then it gives me a pretty perfect stitch from intersection to intersection. And from this point I would take it and I'll clip the threads, and then I'll cut the extra fabric off and press it open, and it'll give me a long strip. When you're cutting these strips, I cut them about 2 inches longer than the width of my the sashing that I need. So 2 inches longer. What I'm going to do now is press this in half like this. So I'll press it in half like this and then prepare it to go on the quilt. I decided to move my machine to my big kitchen table because this quilt is pretty heavy and pretty cumbersome, so I need as much help as I can supporting the weight of the quilt as I stitch. So I'm going to use my machine at my big dining room table. I have my front sashing cut and pressed, not cut, but pressed in half, so it's ready to go. And so I'm going to place it on the top of the quilt. And you want to have the raw edge to raw edge, so the fold is going to be away from the stitch line. And at the same time, I'm going to line up my back sashing right sides together with the quilt. So it's flush here, and you can see that's wrong side, and then this is on the fold. And when I stitch, I'm going to use my seam guide on my machine to sew a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and I'm just going to gently move the fabric through. And of course it's pretty heavy, so it's going to be a lot of starting and stopping as I get it through here. But I'm going to go ahead and finish this entire stitch, then I'll come back on camera and show you the next step. In my next step, I went ahead and finger pressed the back sashing out, and then I've pinned this to the other part of the quilt. So you can see this is the front of the quilt, and so the quilt is back to back. Each section is back to back, and then I've pinned at the ends and then at the middle. And so now I'm just going to take this part and go to my sewing machine. Again, I'm on this heavy table to get as much support as I can from the for the quilt, the weight of the quilt. And I'm just going to go ahead and start stitching my 1/2 inch seam allowance. Again, this is slow and go because I'm going to constantly have to move the quilt around to keep it stable and not so it won't pull at my sewing machine. So I'm going to finish this step, and then I will show you what's next. I have my the front of the quilt sewn to the back, and so at this point I'm going to pull this apart, and this is the part where it's going to get really heavy and hairy, and I'm going to place it under the sewing machine. So what I'm going to do for this step is fold over this piece and stitch it down along the right side, and it's going to get pretty cumbersome. So what I'll do is I want to start it first, and then when I get into the middle I want you to see exactly how much bulk this is going to carry, but that you can still do it on a regular machine. So I'll start it right quick, and then I'll be back on camera to show you what it looks like in the middle and at the end. I'm going to show you how bunched up this quilt is right now. I'm not even halfway through. I'm actually probably about 1/3 of the way through, but I kind of have it squished in here so that I can sew it hopefully fairly simply. And all I'm doing is just folding the fabric over a little bit and stitching a little bit at a time. So, but it's slow and go, but it's still doable on this machine. So, it's so slow. And so every 3 or 4 stitches, or maybe 10 or 12 stitches, I'm just pulling and tugging just to make sure that it goes through. And like right now I have a whole bunch of it stuffed into the throat of the machine, but I'm going to get it done and I'll show you what it looks like when I'm finished. So I have the stitching done along the right side. I folded over that edge. The only thing that I'm going to do now is go back and do another stitch on the side that did not have the fold to give it a nice finished look. And it'll be just as difficult maybe going through the machine, but this side historically this side has been easier to do. So I'm going to do this one through the machine, and then I'll show you the next step. Here is the completed quilt. It is finally finished. This is the top of the quilt. I'm really proud of it, and mostly I'm proud of the fact that I didn't have to buy any fabric. except for the sashing fabric. So all of this white that you see on the front, that's all I had to pay for, along with the sashing on the back. I didn't even have to purchase any additional material for the binding. You can see, if you look on the left side of the quilt, it's mostly this cream binding, which is the same as the front. The right side of the quilt is more of the brown binding, which is the sashing on the back. And a lot of times when I show the front of a Quilt-As-You-Go, my subscribers, you guys want to see the back. So I'm going to flip it over right quick so that you can see the back of it. Oh, just a sec. Okay, and so here you can see the brown sashing, and then all of the other blocks that are in the quilt. Let's see. Try not to get too close in front of it, but so here's the back. And so for each of the types of blocks that I did, if you see an elephant block, it definitely has an elephant on the back of it. These blocks are the strip piece blocks, and you can see the quilting on the front. And then the solid colored fabrics, some of those are just free motion quilting. So I'm really proud of this quilt. I've even put a label on it. Maybe I can zoom in a little bit on the label. Well, I won't zoom in too much on it. But there's the label right there. This is a Christmas gift, so I'm really excited. I don't want to say who it's for yet. But here is the finished quilt. It's so beautiful.